Hi, everyone. Oh my gosh, here we are. Okay, hi, this is so bizarre. This is the first time I've done this ever. So, welcome everyone as I try to get Monica on here. Hold on one second. Just waiting for Monica to, she's unable to join. Hold on one sec. Okay.
Hey,
Oh my gosh.
we did it.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Yay.
Yay.
Hi. Um, so welcome everyone. Welcome, Monica. Um, just FYI, this is our very first time doing this, both of us. And we're not that we're a little technically challenged, but we're here. Me in Uruguay, Monica in LA. Um, this is let me just do a little introduction of what we're doing here, and then we'll introduce you. So this is a series we started called CAMPO Conversations this year to kind of bridge last year's theme of radical nature with this year's theme unsettled, um, on migration and movement. And we've been talking to artists that participated in CAMPO Artfest last year. And I think you are our fifth talk. We're doing them in presencial, so in Uruguay. Um, Presencial, where how do you say that? In person.
Mm-hmm.
That's very funny. And also online and in English and in Spanish. And today we're going to speak to Monica in English because, as we know, that's my preferred language. For those of you that don't know about Campo that are listening, we are a nonprofit based in Pueblo Garzón. We invite artists and international creatives and local creatives to come to our beautiful little magical slice of paradise, to have a transformative experience, something that will give them an aha for their work, for their life, and that they'll take back to their communities, to their own practice, and have it ripple out into the world. And we do that through various programs. One of them is Campo Artfest, which now has a residency that is, we'll talk about that more as the year goes on. But Campo Artfest is changing a little bit this year. But last year we had a residency with 5 artists. Monica was able to come a couple weeks early during the residency. She wasn't actually a resident, but she was a quasi-resident. Um, and the artists come and make site-specific work, and we share it with the public. And Monica's going to talk to us a little bit about her experience at ArtFest and also about her experience as an artist. She is a very dear friend. I want to give that caveat. We met through my sister who used to live in LA, and I think we met during our second art fest ever, right? Is that
Yeah.
when we actually first met?
Yeah.
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 So it's been a journey that we've been on together, in our lives and as friends and as both as artists. So welcome, Monica. Um, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and your journey from Uruguay to LA, and then a little bit about your journey in becoming an artist?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited. And thank you, Heidi, and thank you, Campo, for hosting me and believing in my work and my journey, and always being a such an amazing support and beacon for me. Um, so a little bit about my history and background. I'm I'm born in Uruguay. My parents immigrated when I was 7 years old. So I pretty much grew up in the US. So I am what you would call, I guess, a Latinx, right? So born elsewhere, but made my life in the United States. And as you do as an immigrant, you start to sort of assimilate, and you start to, do all the things, and that's basically what happened. So we moved to the East Coast, and we were an East Coast family, and I grew up there, and
Where?
I
Where?
grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey.
That.
Elizabeth, New Jersey, and it was actually amazing because I was so close to Manhattan. And that was sort of like my saving grace, because early on in high school, I knew that I needed to go to art school, and I knew I wanted to be in New York. So I was only a train ride away. So even during high school, I would cut class, take the train, and go and take photos, in the village. And it was great to be that close in proximity. So, um, I sort of, got into the system. It was difficult in the beginning as a kid to sort of, enter a completely new place, in terms of, communicating. I definitely felt like I was an outsider. I definitely went through the bullying. I went through that whole part of my life where, now looking back, I realized like that was pretty traumatic, and some things were sort of severed that I now try and sort of recapture in my work, which we can get into a little bit later. But yeah, there was all of that. There was the bullying. There was the I'm just going to be quiet in a corner and not voice, and not try to communicate. So I did a lot of sort of internal work, and art became a place where I went. Immediately it felt like that was a safe place for me to go, but nothing was really obvious at that time until in high school I met this incredible art teacher, and he was like the love of my life. He was like the sweetest man ever. And I would just spend, all of my days, like in my senior year, I had all of my credits to graduate, and sat around his table, and he was like the godfather. All the students would like be around him, and my question to him was like, okay, so how do I get into the art world? But I knew I wanted to be independent. I knew that I needed to sort of take care of myself, so how do I make money, and how do I continue to make art? And his suggestion was like, you need to go to New York, and you need to study commercial art, which was what you called, advertising design and all of that at the time. So that's what I did. I went to New York, and I got a degree in advertising design, and I was in advertising for a long time, and then eventually kind of moved into the design part of that, because I realized like, oh, I'm actually not a good copywriter, and I'm not necessarily a good art director, but I really want to be in the design world. And that's when I switched, and I started designing for, I started off at Y&R in their Hispanic department, actually. I don't even think you know about this,
I
but yeah,
definitely don't.
I worked on AT&T, and I worked on the Hispanic arm of Y&R for a year. And then I left and started sort of my design career then. And that was a good, once I switched and I was in New York, I stayed in the design world, and I worked for a production company called Attic. That was really a British company that came over from England, and they were these like incredible artists. And I ended up working for them, and then moving to the East Coast and opening up an office for them in San Francisco. And that's where my San Francisco history comes in. And I started working on a lot of design-driven work. So it was very, very design-driven. It was very sort of cutting edge. And I started to feel like I was making my art because there was so much freedom at the time. This was like in the 90s in San Francisco, you know. So that was super interesting, and continued to do that a little bit more, and then eventually decided that I needed a break and started painting. And I moved to Toronto for a year with my husband, and we worked on a Disney animation film for a year while I was painting. And that's when I kind of, you know, it started to feel like I think there's something sort of tugging at me, but it wasn't necessarily 100% sure that I wanted to throw everything away, because I really loved directing. At this point, I was directing, and I felt really connected to both worlds. And let's see, and then we moved to LA for family and my husband's work, and I started working for Kyle Cooper at Prologue, and then I started doing title sequences and working in film. And that was really sexy, amazing work. But a lot of it, you know, not much time for myself. Someone was always, you know, compromised. It was either myself, my work, or my family. And I was also directing a team at the same time. So I was responsible for my work output, which I love doing. So lots of painting, and but painting digitally, right, in Photoshop. So it was like on Photoshop for like 15, 12 hours a day, all the time, just making so much work. And my eye really became so tuned, you know. I felt like I was just every time I would make something, a storyboard for a title sequence, and I would look at something that I did maybe a month ago, it felt like that was another person. We were just talking about this earlier. It just felt like the growth was exponential, you know. So I felt like my eye was tuning and my aesthetic was tuning. And I was also directing a team of like maybe 15, 20 people. And it started to wear on me, and I started to feel like, oh, I think I need to turn inward. And that was I would say 10 years ago now, where I just kind of shut the door and just left, you know. I was like, okay, I think this is sort of I have a real call for something else, and I wasn't sure what that was. I couldn't put it into words, you know. When I left and I was speaking to Kyle, I said, I just, you know, I think I just need to go paint and be with my family. I think I'm at that point right now, and I'm not sure if I'm coming back. And I haven't actually integrated that part of my, you know, I guess you could say capability into my work just yet. There is a piece that we shared that I did for CAMPO, where the short film that I think we posted on IG, where I started to sort of kind of dip back into that. So that's sort of part of the story also, is there is this other half of me that is really interested in storytelling through that format. Yeah, so.
But just to say that, yeah, you're a storyteller. You always have been, and no matter what the format is, you're still telling stories. I
Yeah,
would, right?
yeah.
Which is a good segue into tell us a little bit about your story, your personal story. I know your work, your paintings, and everything that else is kind of coming out of you right now is really inspired by um, I think you would say like what's happening in your life at the time or something like that. And I think a lot of that has to do with also your ancestry and lineage. And can you talk a little bit about that? I had a question before that though, which is about your bullying and that part of feeling different. And was that because you were from another country or you spoke Spanish or because you were a weirdo artist at heart? Like
Mm-hmm.
those are two
Yeah.
different questions.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah, they're sort of related, I would say. Yeah, the 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 bullying part was interesting because I think I only started to unravel that this past year when um, let's see, yeah, it was this year, because if we look at the work and I sort of match up where things are, my work is actually a diary of what's happening, even though I work completely abstractly, everything that I make is derived from something that is happening in my life. Um, so let's see, I lost the thread.
You were
The
talking about bullying or your childhood, your childhood.
Yeah, yeah. So the idea that I felt like, during that time, like something was sort of cut off, and what I realized, and how that sort of links up with, my work, after doing some research on the May We Be Free installation. And this year, I did a lot of research on language and what happens when language is interrupted, or when language isn't passed down, or when traditions are severed, and that loss of storytelling, of learning through gathering, learning through ritual. There is this sort of I guess it's a trauma in some way, where you you have to sort of like link back and understand, like, where and how did that happen, and how to recapture that, and how to sort of heal um, what happened, and how that affected, maybe how I would maybe tell stories, maybe I would be writing, or maybe language would be more my superpower, Um, Whereas for me, it was all about going inside, because that felt safe to me, and expression through making. And I'm not alone in this. I'm sure there's plenty of people out in the world that feel this also, where, it feels like that is a place where not necessarily where answers are, but where there's harbor, there's in harbor and feeling safe. I feel completely powerful to just go to my edges. It feels important for me to go to those edges. So, um, uh, part of the unraveling, or actually the questioning that started to happen after my visit to Uruguay, and after doing the the self-imposed residency, the unofficial residency, where I just went for 3 or 4 weeks, and you let me paint in one of the houses there. Um, that was kind of like my test to see, like, okay, what is it? Like, I was really being called to the land. And this was after doing the interview with my parents for one of the pieces we'll talk about later. But I felt a real pull to understand, what is that? Who was that Monica that was bullied, and why, and when did that, when that sever happened, what did I leave behind? Because the entire time that I'm here living in the US, I'm sort of assimilating, right? I'm being a really good immigrant, right? I'm going to school, I'm getting my degree, I'm working hard, I have a family, I'm paying my taxes, like the whole thing. But there is this sense of like yearning for okay, like, how do I identify, and how do I fit in the world, and what is it that I can be doing, or what can I give voice to, how can I help, you know um sort of, bring all the pieces together for myself and maybe for others as well. I do realize there is that responsibility, and I do feel that, and I think that to me is part of the authenticity that I look for. I think that there's a lot of conversation about authentic work and like, you know, not going with the flow and like really, and that to me is so important because the more that I search, the stories are repeated, right? Generations. And as we know, things get repeated over and over again. And some of those behaviors don't necessarily have to be repeated or shouldn't be repeated. So for me, for my children and my daughter and my son, it's so important for me to understand what happened and where in my lineage and where in the story could things have been done differently, maybe now knowing what we know. And another really just point I want to make about that is that the kind of work that I want to make, I want to sort of offer, these points of view, but also that doing that kind of work really is requires sort of a softening of the heart for both sides, because whether you're on the colonizing side or whether you're on the the oppressive side, there's stories, right? There's stories and there are people, and there are difficult stories and complicated stories, so that softening is, I think, for me, what is really important in my work, regardless of what I'm looking to explore.
Do you want to, do you feel like sharing a little bit of like, the actual story or how you have inspiration? We talked a lot about the female lineage in your line and how
Mm-hmm.
you found your own power there. Can you talk a little bit about that if you feel comfortable?
Yeah, the story of my I've been working a lot with on my mother's side on in that story and how that works, and or how that has unfolded. And my mom left Uruguay, and she was, in her 30s, 35, I guess, when she moved over. And she was really uh, passionate about, medicine, and that was her passion. And she was in school to do that. But once she married and they immigrated, that idea or that person or that desire to to go and or to follow that passion was dimmed, and she never really went back. That didn't happen for her, and that was always really painful for me to see because I knew that story, and then when I traced that back a little bit further, her mom actually did chase her dreams. Her mom was an educator and did chase her dream, but made some errors, in leaving behind, her daughter to do that. And she came back and visited, but she wasn't as present as I guess would have been ideal for my mom. And some of that is interesting to look at, just in terms of the future, is like how many women, and how many women behind me and in front of me, and what is the pattern that we can learn from and that we can perhaps do things differently. I'm chasing my dreams. I'm going to actually be going to grad school. I haven't told anyone. Hello, live. I'll be
Yeah.
going, I'll be chasing my dream and going to grad school in London at the RCA, and I'll be there starting September. And that is also someone who I'm leaving. I'm going on my own, and my family is staying here. But we're going to do it in in a way that feels supported. You know, my husband's 100% supporting me. My children are going to come visit, and I will be back. So it's interesting to kind of understand, like, what is the pattern, and how can you, in the life that you're living now, how can we do the things that we want to do? I want it all. Like, I want to be a mom. I want to be, a great spouse. I want to be a great friend. I want to be an amazing artist. I want to do it all, but with care, right? And it's the same way I want to approach my work. I want there to be care in the work that I do.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And super inspiring, right? And I feel like, watching your journey and being able to come here is a little bit about living into a dream, which is also living into my dream. And I love sharing that with you. Can you talk a little bit about the actual work and how all this inspiration translates? Um, just to give a little background, we invited Monica to when we had to pivot to online in 2020, we invited artists that were not here to share pieces of work. I can't even remember what our theme was that year. Do you? That's
I don't remember.
terrible. But whatever our theme was, Monica started working with her parents with this video that we posted. And then she came back a year later, I think, which she referred
Yeah.
to before, and stayed at Canteen on the off season as
Mm-hmm.
my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and started, I don't know, there's a whole thread that all led up to this year's Art Fest. Let's hear a little bit about that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, let's see, I guess I'll go back to 2020. Um,
And if you want me to
yeah,
show work, just tell me
yeah,
when.
yeah. I'll kind of set it up a little bit.
Okay.
Um, so 2020, we know, was the pandemic, and it was difficult times for all of us, and everyone was going inward. And I was part of that as well. I remember doing like a painting a day at the time, and I had just moved into this studio, so there was a lot of uh, sort of hibernating and wintering going on, and I wanted to interview my parents, and I wanted to know more about them and understand some of the decisions that they've made. Now, this is, before, digging into my ancestry or any of that. That was just coming from like, oh my gosh, I'm really feeling their mortality, and I really want to be with them, and see them as individuals. And I thought it would be really great to interview them separately in my studio. And they don't really spend a lot of time in my studio. Like, my parents don't really come and say, "Hey, what are you working on?" They're very sort of, in their world. And I invited them in, and we had tea, and I would sit across from my dad and my mom for at least, it was amazing. It was at least 2 hours every day. And I wouldn't have to say much, really, just a couple of things, and to get them started. And they told me their story and their reasons for leaving. And for my dad, it was incredible. It was like an adventure for him.
Mm.
Dad, raced motorcycles and was an entrepreneur, and he was a pharmacist, and he's sort of like jack of all trades kind of person, and he, um, loved the US. He loved what this country did, for him and his life, and for me. So that, I started just by interviewing them, and it just sort of became like I wanted to hear their voices, and I knew I wanted to make something that was about it was about crossing borders. That's what
Oh, yeah. Thank
yeah,
you.
it was the yeah, frontiers, right?
Yeah.
So that was part of my question for them. And, you know, what ended up happening is that I started to get like little morsels of their life, you know, and things that they um, still wanted to do late in life, and things that they had sort of let go of.
Mm.
And so I ended up cutting together that short film, and you can kind of show some of the images that we have. Heidi's gonna show
Hold
you
on.
her. We had to rig this because there's no way to share screen on the live. So Heidi has a PDF that I put together for her, for you guys to look at while I talk over it.
Hold on. Oops.
So the film, and these are,
Can you
these are,
see that?
yeah, these are two of the paintings that went with it. And the one on the left is Palomita, which is, um, you know, translated to little dove in Spanish, which is what my grandfather would call me. My mom told me when I was little, my great grandfather. And then the one on the right is dedicated to my dad, and it's a abstract representation of a racetrack. And those are some of the stories that I was painting to when I was listening to them. And if you go to the next one, Heidi. Oh no, sorry, you don't, sorry. I think you have a different one up, but that's okay. Um, so what I did was just kind of have my, I would have headphones on, and I would paint to these, and also made,
Here.
um,
Here.
oh, here it is. Yeah.
Sorry.
So yeah, no worries.
Oops.
There's a couple of shots of me painting with the on the floor and then on the wall, and here even, you know, I'm already starting to mix soil in my paint. Um, that's, you know, just the idea of having the extra added texture and soil from, you know, where we live here in LA was infused into some of these paintings. So so after doing this piece, I really had this heart pull to go to Uruguay after listening to their stories and after being with them and sitting with them. So, you know, as we mentioned, I went back, I think it was in March, and spent, you know, 2 to 3 weeks. I basically took my dad back to Uruguay for a family reunion and ended up in Garcon, where Heidi is, to paint really and to really connect with the land. And on my way back there, I remember, you know, just on the dirt road, needing to just open the doors to the car and literally just put my hands on the soil. It was so powerful to be there. And I would just wake up every morning at 8 in the morning, and just go outside, and whenever I could catch the sunset, the sunrise, and just kind of commune with, you know, the sunrise and the sunset and sort of the pulse of the land. And I painted outside quite a bit, you know, with horses, and I didn't actually know what I was doing when I was there. I didn't have any particular, um, you know, idea of what I wanted to paint, but I knew that I needed to be with the land, and I knew that I wanted to paint with the soil, and I knew that I wanted to, you know, use the coal that I was burning. I had like a burning, you know, a potbelly stove with like so much firewood that Heidi brought. That was amazing. Um, and let's see, go to the next slide there. So here are a couple of the paintings that came about once I returned from Garcon. I had this sort of feeling of, it's sort of like a regenerative feeling, and that's what this green started to evoke for me. And I started working on this series called Reencounter, and it's all about really, the land, and it was all about the energy that the land was infusing in me and the desire to be there. So here, I'm still working in my traditional sort of, working with energy. It's very much about, tapping into a feeling and emotion, and then attacking the canvases. And then there on the lower right, on the lower left, sorry, you can see I start to really, wonder about figuration. I ended up photographing a lot of my family there, and I started thinking about, my ancestors and how I could start to bring them into my work. But I wasn't really sure how figuration would begin to, take shape. But this is when it started. So it's kind of interesting to look at.
Can I
Um,
can I say
yeah,
something? Sorry, I just want to interrupt for a sec. Just to be able to witness you, we were talking about how there's an archaeological um let's say bent in your work, or like you said, oh yeah, if I could have been an archaeologist, like that's something you're drawn to. And I remember you doing this work and being with you, and there was like massive canvases on the floor, like long canvases, and what that moment when you were doing circles and you were using color and green, and
yeah,
it was kind of like, wait, what? And all of a sudden we were there together and we're like, wait, it's a portal. It's
yeah,
like, it was like a
yeah,
giant invitation that I feel like you just dove into then. And why I bring it up is because it's a real testament on that thing you were talking about, feeling free when you paint.
yeah.
And also to other artists or people, just any human, to be able to trust your intuition and trust your gut. And I really appreciate that you really follow that and dig into that, no pun
Hmm.
intended, or
Yeah,
pun
yeah,
intended.
yeah. Or pun intended.
Yeah. But anyway,
Yeah,
I just wanted to throw that in.
yeah, I think it's really cool to look at some of this, and I don't know, if anyone will find it as interesting as we do right now, but looking looking back at some of this is kind of cool. Um, okay, we can keep going. Let's see. And then I just wanted to kind of fast forward a little bit into this painting, which is it's called Witness, and this is me kind of, starting to really dig into figuration here, and really different than any of my other work. I became really interested in this indigenous tribe in the southern cone of South America, and these are the Selknam. And I read tons of books, and I got really into this particular elder, and she became this sort of guiding force in my studio for a long time. And a lot of the writing and a lot of the sort of like that looks like scribbles is their language, and it's their language abstracted. So here's when I started to make the connection of the loss of language and the abstraction of language, and how it's all sort of tied in to how we evolve and how we're put together, and particularly for indigenous cultures, how important it is to keep some of these languages alive, and pass down the rituals via ceremony, via storytelling, whatever that is, the importance of that. And this was sort of like I was looking and pouring through a lot of these books, and in particular, an archaeologist slash priest. I think he was German or French that spent a lot of time in Chile. His name is Martin Guisende, and he ended up taking a lot of these photographs. And the gaze is really interesting, right? Because the photographs are, them. You can see like how trusting they were of him, to sort of look straight at the camera. And all of the photographs are taken in that way because he was basically documenting. He wasn't trying to do anything else. So I don't. I mean, I'm not an illustrator. I don't necessarily illustrate, but I was so desperate to sort of see her in my studio in a painting. So this was an interesting piece for me. And we can go on to the next one. I'll sort of tie it in. And then I started to, you know, kind of play around a little bit more with, okay, how do how do I bring in the soil and the earth, and how do I begin to manipulate or bring in this idea of superimposing photography. So this is me bringing in, you know, a bit of my background as a bit of the design flex in here, where it's a painting, it's a photograph, it's an affected photograph with, you know, organic materials over the top. So these were really studies for me, and eventually I think sometimes I don't know why I do some of these studies, but I just know I need to make them. And then when I, you know, sort of helicopter out, like I'm doing right now, I can kind of see, oh, wow, you needed to make these in order to, you know, get to the installation, you know, that I ended up in. So
Let's go there.
yeah, so we can keep going. These are sort of relevant in that part of this was also, you know, working with roots, right? So not only working with my roots, but working with actual roots. So, you know, the idea of charring and burning and regenerating and creating surfaces and redefining how these pieces come together, and how painting is now part of it. Like, is it a painting? Is it a sculpture? Is it, what is it? I don't know. I'm here, I'm exploring. This is what was happening right before the installation. So Heidi was telling me, what are you making? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm burning things. I don't know what I'm making.
I would like send, I would see you'd send me something, I'd send it to Dario, and we're like, what is she doing? What's that? Okay, we're gonna trust. We're
Yeah.
trusting.
So I was in my process, deeply in my process, last year, and you know, it was also a really difficult time. My dad was ill, and he passed last August, and I started making work with ashes, not his ashes, but just ashes, because that, you know, fire and firewood and cooking over fire has always been so important for our family. And it's just part of how, you know, Uruguayans are put together. Like, we grill, we like fire, we like, you know, we like the smell of fire, we like embers, and all of this is now sort of bubbling up in me, and I can see where it's going somewhere. So I started to make some of these pieces that were kind of unrelated, but still needed to make pieces, you know. So these are in here as a segue. If you go to the next one.
Okay, but I don't want you to skip over the fact that your dad passed during this whole process, because
Yeah.
it was so poignant. You had already started working on something that we knew was going to be ancestral, like you knew,
Mhm.
and then boom, it was like, whoa, this is getting super real. And you threw yourself into it, really, everything.
Yeah, I think his illness and, you know, what he was going through, and I was basically his death doula, and I was there when my husband and I were both there when he crossed over, and I was in the middle of doing all of this, and I realized that that he was going to guide me through the rest of this. I knew that he would want me to ask the questions and keep going. I ended up doing a really beautiful ritual with him, and I came back into the studio, and interestingly enough, some of these canvases that I was working on, and again, I didn't know why I was working the way I was working, but at one point there was this canvas was on the floor, and you know, the charred pieces of roots were everywhere. I mean, they're actually still in my studio now, but um, and I threw this canvas on the floor, and then I picked it up again, and then I started to make this other piece where now, you know, there's this sense of like, oh, these canvases are no longer canvases, they're starting to become sculptural. You know, everything is sort of coming off the wall, like everything is coming alive. I felt like I was really communing now with these sort of guiding forces, and I just needed to really listen. So I started doing a lot of drumming, and I started really, you know, paying attention to ancient rituals and incorporating a lot of those rituals into my work. And if we go to the next slide.
Can I
Um,
say something
yeah.
else? So just not to forget, along with the drumming, you were researching so much about the indigenous people of the area. Like I learned so much. Like you really went off of your own lineage into a bigger picture, into a bigger story
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, I just started to feel like, you know, I was curious about, you know, ancient civilizations and not necessarily unique to Uruguay. You know, I did look deeply at the charruas, and I looked deeply at the relationship there and the amnesia behind the incident that happened, and how people in Uruguay feel about it, and um, how it's dealt with or not dealt with. And like we said before, you know, what I mentioned is just it all just takes a lot of sort of care, you know, and it's complex, you know. And you know, once these pieces started to reflect that they felt like embodiments to me. I think I sent you another image. I don't know if you pulled it in, Heidi. It was
Yes.
it was in the in the WhatsApp. It was basically an image before these where I wasn't sure if they were coming off the wall or they needed to hang off the wall. And it was this moment of like, oh wow, these are all of these canvases that I'm working on actually are cloaks. You know, I didn't realize that I was making cloaks. And then this is actually in my studio, me putting one of them together, and I realized that, you know, once they became cloaked and the form started, that they felt like these are elders. These are actually, you know, elders that are coming together through my work and my process. And there's a few iterations that I've never even shown a lot of this, you know, sort of process work from the installation, but it's interesting to see how different they look in my studio and in on location. And it just creates a different feeling, which is interesting, right? Because, you know, a lot of this work you might, you know, just the same way you would experience a piece in a gallery, it's really different how you would experience a piece, you know, in a site specific installation, you know, like when we were in Uruguay in the actual abandoned tapera, in the, you know, abandoned home, you really felt the presence of other people, you know, and their attraction through the home. You know, that was really powerful for me. I actually spent 2 weeks there and started to really get a sense of like how people lived there, you know, and I didn't know how they were going to be placed at the time. I had, I think, 5 of them with me, and I didn't know if I was going to make more there. I added to them there. I ended up doing a lot of the layering of the soil because it was important for me to blend both places. So I ended up doing some of the canvases, first layers here in the US, and then I foraged for clay and wool and local eucalyptus there in Uruguay, and I used the charring from there and the charcoal from there. yeah, it was such a magical time. Even just thinking about it now, it was just such an incredible experience to be there. Um, let's go to the next one. And I think these are just now, this is an earlier version of the Earth. Earth. This one's named Earth Mother.
Oh, you buried the canvas.
Yeah,
I buried a canvas for you here. You buried one
yeah.
there, right?
Right. And then I joined them together, which is one of the layers of the pieces. And this is me. That's my hand in the mud in Heidi's garage.
Oh yeah, I did that.
Yeah. And yeah, and this is just a profile of using some of the wood pieces that, started to feel like limbs. Yeah, it's just there's the language that started to come forth in these pieces was really fun and unique. It's really started to take my work in a direction that was really exciting for me. And then this, okay, yeah, this is a really great photograph that I took. This is after I came back and I was going to have like an interview, and they asked me to show them the sculpture and another piece. And I chose these two pieces, and I didn't realize how related these two pieces were. So here you can kind of see how these elders, these women, are actually, it feels like they're sisters, or they're coming from the same place,
In
and they're in my studio.
conversation. In
In
conversation.
yeah,
Totally.
completely in conversation. So that was a really special, and it's just interesting because this work just continues to unfold. Like, I feel like I'm about to go back in to this world, and I know that there's just so much more to explore.
Is there more? Oh my God, here we are.
Yeah, this is the last, and this is yeah, this is the piece there
Can you
in one of the rooms.
can you explain a little bit about, why you picked this space and, you painted the whole ruin.
Yeah, the ruin was basically just I don't remember what color it was. I think it was the color of brick.
Concrete,
It,
yeah, brick.
yeah, just kind of cinder block and brick. And there are several ruins. This one didn't have a roof, and it also had a really big giant pole like connecting one room and the other. Oh, these are the armatures that we designed along with a local welder there in Uruguay. The armatures that are placed inside of the cloaks. And so anyway, here at the top, you can kind of see the 3D model that I made to kind of get a sense of the space, and that there wasn't going to be a ceiling. And at one point I thought I wanted to have horses outside. And the reason why is because the charruas, part of their death ritual was that they would take whoever passed, they would take their horse and tie the horse there so that the horse would kind of see them have a smooth crossing. So I thought that was a really beautiful gesture. And we didn't do the horses, but strangely enough, the horses showed up on the field one day, and I was in shock. I couldn't believe that there were two horses just kind of roaming around in the installation. And so I think that was just a gift that I received.
Love it.
Yeah, so the reason why I wanted to paint the entire tapera black, which was freaking everyone out in the town, was because I really wanted to feel like we were in we were sort of we were traveling, we were going to journey, and as soon as you step foot into this, abandoned dwelling, uh, it felt like sort of womb-like in a way, and it really um, felt like it was appropriate, in terms of holding the correct tone and space for these sculptures to stand and hold space. So they're really just,
I'm going to show this.
almost like, yeah, this is the last one that was farther out in the field. So I thought they would all be inside, but they actually ended up being all around the home. There were 3 inside and 2 that were outside. And this one particularly, which is called Temu, is named after um, a a ritual that the Selknam would have, and this particular spirit, they weren't gods. They believed in spirits. This particular spirit, through this ritual, would keep time. And so I was really inspired by how graphic the the let's see, the original, yeah, there it is there, the black and white photo of the original tribe. So I was inspired to honor them and how beautiful their markings were for rituals. And on the left there is the sculpture that was placed. This was placed the farthest out in the land there, and at sunset it was really gorgeous. It was so beautiful. So to me, the magic time to see the installation was between 7 and 8 p.m. in Uruguay.
Beautiful. Mon, we're like almost out of time.
Yeah, I see.
We're at we're at the end of, hold on. Hi. Hi. Um, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about what's next? What are
Yeah,
what are you working on right now?
actually, I am working on I don't know if I can do this. Let's see. Can you see
Yeah.
all of this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why didn't we do that before?
Yeah, we should have done that before. I'm working on a series that is basically just I'm having some fun in the studio before setting off to London, and it feels so great to just be with the paint in a really sort of explosive way and bringing in some color and just having fun, really, just creating a collection to capture this time before things completely change and I dive back in.
I love that our next theme is about movement and you're going to London and your mom just moved and
Yeah,
it's kind of a whole new chapter for you.
yeah, it really is. It really is. It was a great time to capture that and thank everyone for joining and listening. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks, Monica.
Thank you,
Um,
Heidi.
and we will see you at our next my team's gonna kill me, but we have another CAMPO Conversations and I don't know when. So just follow along on Instagram and you can see and we'll see you all soon. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Ciao. Ciao, ciao. Oh, how do you close this?